Let's bring in the A-team. John Bussey is here, associate editor at the Wall Street Journal. Lisa Booth, senior fellow at Independent Women's Voice, and Richard Fowler, radio talk show host, all are Fox News contributors, and we're grateful for that. Good morning to all of you at A-team. All right, so Biden, why wait?
Well, I actually think Joe Biden is a non-factor. He strikes me a lot as Jeb Bush, this sort of establishment figure that has lost touch with the base of the party. He's a thing of the past, and he's also the most boring aspect of the Biden-Obama ticket. People showed up to vote for President Obama. They didn't show up to vote for Biden. So I actually think he's going to end up being a non-factor here. I also think President Trump sees that as well, sees the similarities to Jeb Bush by labeling him Sleepy Joe, similar to low energy with Jeb Bush. The two candidates to watch from my perspective are Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. I think they're the most unique. And when you're dealing with a really crowded primary field, that uniqueness will serve you as a benefit.
If we throw back up that polling on New Hampshire 2020 Democratic preference, Sanders 30%, Biden 18% he would get, and Buttigieg surging now to 15%, Richard.
Well, listen, Buttigieg is definitely a new fresh face, and everybody's trying to figure out he's more than just a flavor of the month now. And so I think people are really trying to figure out, is he a candidate to go with? I think that New Hampshire number doesn't surprise me because, Vermont is a bordering state. Bernie Sanders spent a lot of time in New Hampshire. He has an infrastructure there from the past presidential election. And as far as Joe Biden goes, I think that there is a move for him to run. I think there's definitely a base and a lane for him to run on. I think if you talk to voters in Macomb County, Michigan, they will say, give us Joe. If you talk to people, old military folks who are like, I'm not okay with how the president's behaving, Joe Biden is the natural choice for them. The question is when will Joe Biden announce? I think he has some time to wait simply because he is the front runner. He has what I would call a floor in polling, whereas most candidates have a ceiling. So Kamala Harris doesn't get above 10%. Joe Biden doesn't go below 25% on nationwide polls.
How do you see it, John? Well, we've all said don't pay attention to the polls until much later in this process, until we're past some of the debates and the polls begin to mean something. What I did find interesting, though, was that there was no woman in that top three of the preferred candidates, even though there's some very compelling women candidates at this point already on the field. Look, Biden is doing pretty well for a guy who has not even announced that he's running for president yet. He's lining up support. He's lining up union leadership. He's lining up people who will come out in support of him and endorse him as soon as he does announce. Buttigieg is, to some degree, I think, still a flavor of the month. Another very compelling speaker, but kind of the latest Beto O'Rourke. What's happened to O'Rourke, who has completely fallen off the radar screen? Once you get into the process of proposing policies, what's going to make people's lives better or worse, that's where Pete Buttigieg will really
you better have some answers, too.
And he doesn't have any quite yet.
Yeah, topic number two. Sorry, Lisa. I just want to move on to this. They had a 90-minute conference call last night among Democrats in the House. Lindsey Graham was on with Sean last night, talked about the stampede for impeachment.
There's going to be a stampede to impeach President Trump. They're going to use the Mueller report, anything they can find to try to destroy his presidency. Nancy Pelosi's not in charge of the Democratic Party. The radical left is in charge. So I expect that they will be impeachment proceedings against President Trump. And the Mueller report, to me, is vindication of President Trump.
Well, if you read the readout on the conference call, Nancy Pelosi is trying to hold back the horses on this issue, Lisa.
Well, yeah, because she recognizes the fact that the Democrat majority in the House runs through districts that run in Republican-leaning districts. And those are the members that she's trying to protect. And forcing them to vote on impeachment is not going to help as they run for re-election in 2020. There's really nothing to impeach the president on, though. So I think it's a fool's errand for Democrats if they choose to move down that path. I also think that as we learn more about the origins of the Russia investigation between U.S. Attorney Huber as well as the Inspector General, also we know Attorney General Barr is looking at it, what we're going to find out is things that some of the mainstream media, like the New York Times, are coming to realize that we were essentially influenced by Russian disinformation, which is the dossier that was paid for by the Democratic Party. So I think once we unveil that, we get to the bottom of the origins of the Russia investigation, this conversation is going to change dramatically.
That point, John, seems to be the next chapter in this story.
Yes. But I wouldn't put the Mueller report aside. There was plenty in there that Mueller thought represented obstruction. He just didn't come out and say, I'm going to prosecute the president on this. He kicked the can down the road. He didn't kick it to Barr, who's a political appointee and put a very positive spin on the report. He kicked it down the road to Congress, and ultimately that's going to be the election. I think at this point, Nancy Pelosi is trying to Nancy Pelosi is trying to protect those seats. She's also continuing the investigations into President Trump, and she wants to act from strength. And that might not come until the next election changes the complexion of the House.
I think John is right on something. I think he's right on a couple points. I think point number one he's right on is that Speaker Pelosi is the best bean counter that there is. She knows how to count the votes. She's been in Congress a long time, and she understands that now this is not a legal question. This is a political question that House Democrats have to ask themselves. Are they willing to go down the road of impeachment? And is there enough political capital to get senators to vote for impeachment? And will it sour the American public if they decide to do it?
I don't even know if some are taking that in consideration when they continue to push the impeachment talk. But wait, Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California, was on earlier today. His takeaway from the conference call was really interesting. Listen.
Speaker Pelosi set the tone. She said we need to be deliberate and methodical. There shouldn't be any rush to any judgment. One of the things I think we can all agree about is the Mueller's report's conclusion that there was sweeping and systematic interference in our election by the Russians.
Is the rest of his party getting that message, Lisa?
Well, if you want to look at the way Russia has had an impact on the country, it's the dossier, which was likely Russian disinformation that was weaponized by the FBI to obtain FISA warrants. That was probably what led to the start of the Crossfire hurricane to begin with, considering the fact that the FBI had met with Christopher Steele prior to launching that investigation, who was already employed by Fusion GPS and had already started working on the Steele dossier. So if Democrats are actually serious about getting to the bottom of Russia's influence in the country, look no further than the dossier. Real quick on the obstruction of justice aspect, if Mueller had the goods on obstruction, it was his job to recommend charges on that. He did not. Also, it wasn't just Attorney General Barr who was appointed by President Trump. You also had Rosenstein, who had talked about removing the president from office, who signed onto that as well. The obstruction of justice is not there. It's a fool's errand for Democrats to move forward on that.
A couple of things here. I think history is going to be the judge on this, but history also saw in the Nixon impeachment that after the report came out from the Justice Department, it took a year of investigation from the Congress where they actually decided to do anything, right? So I think Congress has a role here for oversight, and I think in accountability, you'll see them take that role.
Everybody agrees with that.
Right, and I think what you'll also see
is how far they go.
Is how far they will go, what the political calculus will be.
2 years.
But remember, as we saw under Nixon, they waited a year. There was a year of investigation where Congress
doesn't have the tools at their disposal that Mueller did. What can they get to the bottom of that Mueller has not been able to?
It's a different.
They've wasted America's time. Tens of millions of dollars.
You're asking a different question. What the Mueller report was doing.
You're asking the wrong one.
Richard, it comes down to a very simple question. Does it behoove your party to continue with the message of impeachment? Are you supporting that?
No, I think our party needs to have we have to have oversight over this president. If that oversight over the next year, over various investigations after they get his financial statements, then they decide they're going to impeach him. That's the decision.
Pelosi is going to exert oversight. She's going to do it from a position of strength. And if that means that the investigations uncover elements that she needs to move forward on, she might. But she does want to protect those seats that were won by Democrats from Trump districts. And she wants to see what happens in this next election before I think that she opens the discussion
With regard to Russian interference, it's on page 1 of the Mueller report. Michael Mukasey, the former AG, asked the question, when did Mueller know this? And why did he wait so long to tell us? It's a critical question now. Watch it. Lisa, thank you.
I think
Richard,
a lot of us
have
been asking that.
John, come on back, okay?
Pleasure.
Great panel today.
Thank you.
Got